everyone. Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. We are excited to have you. This is the Wednesday, August 7th, 2019 edition of our little weather get-together. This is show number 287. And tonight we have with us Eli Jacks. He is the program leader for the Noaa Hazard Simplification program that's been going on for the past couple of months. And we're going to be talking about that tonight. Something you may have heard about, something you may not. If you're a little bit more into the weather community, you probably heard some mention of this, but if not, we're going to let you know what's going on behind the scenes to help you guys get better prepared for severe weather and how to better understand those watches, warnings, and advisories that are issued. So we are happy to have Eli with us tonight. This is a live broadcast, so we would love to welcome your questions, comments. You can do that many different ways. You're probably watching right now on Facebook Live, Periscope, Twitch, or on our YouTube page. All you have to do is send a comment, a question. We'll be monitoring those throughout the show. And if you have any questions, we will, if you have them for our guests or any of our panelists, we will address those throughout the show. And if you're listening on the podcast version, maybe you want to learn more about the Hazard Simplification program, we'll let Eli give you some information on how you can do so, how you can research this topic, and maybe some websites or something like that that you can visit to learn more. So again, we are happy to have you again on the show number 287. I do want to say we've been talking about severe weather today. That severe weather threat is coming to an end. We still have some thunderstorms moving through eastern North Carolina. We did have some severe weather earlier today in the Raleigh area and even down into the Charleston area. And we did have a potential tornado. I'm not going to say confirmed yet because the Weather Service in Wilmington has not been able to do that yet. They'll do their storm survey tomorrow, but there's a lot of video going around on social media, and you saw it today about 3 o'clock. There was a tornado warning issued for Pender County. That's near Topsail Island, Topsail Beach. So we, in fact, shared some videos of that from WECT in Wilmington, North Carolina. So if you want to check those videos out of the potential tornado, you can do that. So I also want to mention, if you live in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area and the surrounding metro area, there is an air quality alert that's going to be up for your Thursday. That's a code orange day. So if you have any of those sensitive breathing problems, you may want to stay inside or at least stay out of the hot temperatures and the stagnant air during the peak heating of the day. So lots going on. And with that, we want to bring in our guest tonight, Mr. Eli Jacks. Like I said, he is the program leader for the Hazard Simplification program. Eli, welcome to the show. We're happy to have you. And since you're a first-time guest, we always like to ask our first-time guests, how did you get caught up in this crazy weather world that we all live in?
Hey, well, good evening, Scotty, and hi, everybody who's listening today. And thanks for inviting me. Probably like all the rest of you, I started at about 4 years old. Any of you guys not started 4 years old being interested in the weather? So most of us are that way. And I was always interested in communication. I'm a proud alumni of the State University of New York system. Had a chance to learn from the great Lance Bozart, and then went on to do some private work in radio and aviation forecasting before I was hired with the Weather Service in 1986, and actually did some development on those Moss equations that you all know and love. Back in the day, it was the NGM, back in the day. And then I got involved in training. So from the National Training Program, many of you may know, we have 3 great training centers in Kansas City and in Norman and in Boulder. And we develop a lot of materials for our forecasters and internationally for folks to use. And so after that, I did get involved in the services. And that's been about the last 15 years of my career is working in policy at the national headquarters. And the Hazard Simplification Project was just something I took on because I saw a need, and it's really been a long road, but I think we're getting close to making some changes to the system. In fact, some are already underway, and some we're still exploring.
So Eli, go ahead, Ricky. Sorry.
I was just like, for people who aren't familiar with what the hazard simplification process is, can you explain it and why the Weather Service is interested in doing it?
Absolutely. Great question. So at the very foundation, we have three headline terms. We issue watches, we issue warnings, and we issue advisories. We also issue other products as well, but that's really the foundation. And so the term watch means that a significant event is possible, but we're not yet certain. Whereas advisory and warning are both terms of imminence, that the hazard is almost certainly going to occur or is already occurring. So we issue those when it's coming. And the only difference between advisory and warning is that advisory is less serious than a warning. The issue is several-fold. So watch and warning both begin with WA. And then we also have the issue where advisory doesn't really mean anything specific. It is not really clear that the term advisory is less serious than a warning. But I think probably the most significant issue is that the three terms are presumed to be hierarchical, that one is the least worst, and then the medium worst, and then the worst. And that's, I think, has been the big source of confusion. And, I want to point out that really in the Weather Service, our key strategic goal is for us to be a weather-ready nation. And in order for everyone to be weather-ready, they need to understand the information that we're putting out. So that's the foundational source of what we're exploring. Is there a better way to express certainty and severity without these three terms that people are largely presuming to be hierarchical with respect to each other?
So Eli, with those three terms, the watch, advisory, and the warning, within those three, there's a myriad of different products. Can you kind of explain all the different text products and warnings and watches and what all goes into that?
Thanks for leading me on. So that, right, those three headline terms are part of the issue, but then we have over 100 what we call products or individual messages that pertain to specific hazards. So heat advisory, flood warning, flash flood warning, winter storm watch, of course, a tornado, hurricane, tsunami, fire even. So it's red flag warning. It crosses the hazard spectrum. And so in addition to being lead of the project, I'm also the chief of our forecast service division, which oversees 11 different service areas. So I won't rattle them off all here, although I finally can. It took a little bit of a while, but aviation, even space weather, and so there's a broad list of messages that we expect people to understand, and that's really at the core of the issue here.
But with only two of those, the tornado and the flash flood, there's also an emergency tag that comes with it. So I guess flash flood emergencies and tornado emergencies. What stipulates when those tags are used?
Right. And so the emergency is one of the things that we want to look in very judiciously. So if you use a term like emergency, and this was something that just rose out of a need during one of the most severe tornadoes in Oklahoma City. And there was just no way to describe that this was a huge tornado on the ground about to impact a major population. And so that's really the definition of when we use an emergency. And similar for flood, if the flooding is so severe, you think about Ellicott City and what happened here in the DC area. That's another example. But I always describe the derecho back in 2012 that traversed all the way from the Midwest. We saw it in the morning going through Chicago, went all the way to the East Coast. And there was just nothing other than a severe thunderstorm warning to describe this event. And so the idea of considering an emergency is to really be able to articulate that, hey, this one is really different.
And Eli, what brought about the possible changes to the system?
Okay, so this is where social science has come in. So we've had social scientists involved in this project right from the very beginning, back in 2014. And what's the motivation behind that? Well, we meteorologists and hydrologists, we created a system, but we don't have expertise in risk communication. So I've been privileged to work with a number of very talented social scientists who study this, how people prepare, how they monitor, how they respond to weather and water events, and to really understand how language and color and all of these factors that we presume people understand interact with how they really do understand.
Thank you for that answer. I also want to ask if you could talk about some of the extensive research that has gone into this program as well.
Right, and so the research has been social science based. And so we started in 2014 going with focus groups. And throughout the project, we have always involved a cross section of the enterprise. So the emergency managers, of course, are our core partner. And then the broadcasters are so critical to be able to express our information to wide audiences. And so we also have worked with other key stakeholders. Of course, our own forecasters have had input into the process. And so very early on, we learned about the fact that the three terms are confused with each other and that there are too many of these products. And so the project quickly evolved into two main branches, and we call that the repair piece and the revamp piece, and I can get more into that a little later. But just to answer your question about the research, in addition to focus groups, we had a generalizable survey towards the end of the project where we polled some 10,000 people about possible changes to the system. Before that, I got a little ahead of myself there. We had something called an institutionalization survey, and we surveyed over 30 key constituencies about how would it impact your operations if we removed the watch, warning, advisory terms. And that's where we learned that warning is the most institutionalized, the most embedded in policies, and advisory the least. And so that was an important piece of information. We had a big interdisciplinary workshop in 2015 where we created prototypes. So suppose you had a clean slate, and we had 8 different breakout groups with again, emergency managers, broadcasters, social scientists, you name it, enterprise partners, of course, and create a new system for us. And they came up with some prototypes that we were then able to follow on and test. And so the last piece of this process has been just in the past year, and that's been a really important piece of the progress, where Dr. Daniela Nagel and I went to 25 different focus groups at 6 different forecast offices across the country, testing as many hazards as we could, and testing some alternatives to find out what really would test the best. And that brings us to where we are today.
Understand. Thank you very much. One quick follow-up. What sort of elements are activated when you say warning versus watch, right? So we know watch and warning, but we want to keep the warning around. What sort of things are activated during that process? Is there emergency management tied in directly to warnings where they get activated to certain areas of their profession to be able to help folks in times of need?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, one of the issues I talked about, the institutionalization, all 3 of the terms are institutionalized to some degree. And that's really important. If we were going to make any change, we'd have to do this very carefully. So for example, I've been hearing, as a result of the webinars that I held in the last few weeks with partners, that even the term advisory, heat advisory, is a signal to open cooling centers. And so that's one way. All of our forecasters are providing outstanding decision support services to their core partners, their emergency managers, and their issuance of our products has a big influence on the types of decisions they make. And of course, that includes evacuation decisions for hurricanes. And you know, one of the things we heard is that, you know, to the degree we can expand the lead time of those types of triggers is important, because some places take the Florida Keys, take such a long time to evacuate. And so that's a key to saving lives and property, which of course is our mission.
All right, I think Scotty was up next.
Yeah, so Eli, you were talking about the social science and kind of I know you went out to emergency management, you went to the weather service offices, broadcast meteorology. Have you guys been able to maybe go into some of these areas that's been affected by some of these maybe tornadoes, floods, and actually talk to the people and say, hey, when this was issued, did you understand what it meant? Have you been able to do any of those, the public face-to-face conversations?
Good question, Scotty. Not so much face-to-face, but there's two main vehicles that we use as input into our process. So after every major event, or not everyone, but after particularly significant events, we'll do what are called service assessments. And we'll send teams out to interview people who were directly affected. And out of those service assessments come recommendations for changing in our national policy. And there are a number of service assessments where those types of messages get back in terms of hazard simplification. The second piece, just to restate, this generalizable public survey. The term generalizable means that it is you specifically test the public in ways that the results can be inferred to be generalizable to the entire population. And so that's where the 10,000 members of the public, when we showed them the prototypes, some people got the current system, some people got a few different prototypes, and we measured how they monitored if at the watch level, how they responded at the warning level, or took action at the warning level. And so we got the public input into the process by those two means.
And so through all of this, you guys have come up with two keywords that you've mentioned a little bit already: repair and revamp. So can we talk a little bit about what those mean, and maybe what repairing something means, and maybe just what revamping an already previous product?
Yeah, glad to do that, Scotty. So the repair we defined as being making changes within the context of the existing system. So we're not changing the watch, warning, and advisory terms, but there are two main components of the repair effort that are already underway. The first is what we're calling consolidation, reducing the number of products, get below 100 products. We're going much more towards an impact focus than on a phenomenon focus. So it doesn't really matter, and Scotty, you and I were talking about this before the show, about what caused the flood. It's water in your basement. So the question is, how many flooding products do you need? So one of the most popular changes that's coming up next year is to greatly reduce the number of our flood products. We're going to go from 5 flavors of flood advisory to just one, and flash flood watch and flood watch into one flood watch. And so that's an example. We did some consolidation for winter. We're going to be doing some consolidation of small craft advisories later this year. There's 4 flavors of those that are just going to go to one. And that goes to the second piece of repair, which is the reformatting. So our messages in the past have been non-standard. They've been of varying lengths, different formats. So for most of our products that are not short-fused, we're going towards a what, where, when, and impacts format. And in the what section of the message, which is right up top, that's where we can specify what kind of a flood it is for those who need that information. But the headline is just going to be, in the case of flood advisory, just one flood advisory, regardless of what the nature is causing that inconvenience is. And so that repair, that reformatting is going to be spread across a great number of our products, all of our non-precipitating products. So that includes wind and temperature and wind chill and some others, and also our marine products coming up in the next year. Actually coming up later this year.
Okay, you just answered exactly what I was going to ask. So
yeah.
That's kind of my question. So from the time, is it going to roll out nationwide, or is it going to be like a region thing, or how's the rollout going to happen?
No, this is a nationwide. So we are going to be rolling that out later this fall for the reformatting. One other important piece is going to be the impact-based tags that are going to be added to flash flood warnings. And so we're going to be going to, as with tornado warnings, what will be coming to severe, but let me focus on tornado. We have a base tag, a considerable tag, and a catastrophic tag. And that's where the emergency comes from that catastrophic tag. So in the case of flash flood warnings, and this pertains to wireless emergency alerts, your phone going off. And so the phone will only go off starting later this fall for considerable and catastrophic tags. And so that's going to reduce the amount of false alerting. Now, I use that advisedly, the false alerting. A flash flood is always a life-threatening type of event. But the fear is that if, given the number of flash flood warnings that are issued, that we fear that people will turn their phones off, will turn their alerting function off, and that's the last thing we want, because that would apply to all hazards. So it's a delicate balance, and we'll be collecting feedback as we go forward. One of the things I always say about the Hazard Simplification Project is we aim to be flexible. We lean forward. Maybe on occasion we lean forward a little bit too far, but we can always adjust and try and reach that perfect balance. And we realize it's important to get there, given that lives and property are at risk.
Eli, one thing that I've seen here in Western North Carolina, this happened last year with Tropical Storm Alberto. We saw a flash flood emergency issue for possible dam failures. Will that continue in this? I know we've seen that, I think, a case out in California and a few other, but will the possibility of dam failure still be included in maybe a flash flood emergency?
Well, yeah. So the nature of the flooding would be in the what section of the message, and then if that's a considerable or a catastrophic, that would be an emergency in that case.
And so I was looking at this. One other thing I want to hit on, and I know that Ricky's got some questions. You were talking about, we're kind of consolidating advisories, flood products, and things like that. One thing you had mentioned earlier was maybe adding a product to increase awareness for severe thunderstorms. And I know just a couple weeks ago in Wisconsin, Minnesota, we saw a derecho move through that's created catastrophic damage with winds 80, 90, 100 miles per hour. Is there any indication? I know you talked about a little bit about it. Could we possibly see maybe not a severe thunderstorm emergency, but maybe some higher emphasis on these severe storms that may have higher wind gusts than the 60 and 70 mile per hour that we're used to?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the key things we want to look at, and I think thunderstorms are a great candidate for that. And the derecho, as I mentioned earlier, is a great case for that. We had a broadcaster on one of our focus groups who said that he was not able to get on the air for the derecho at that point because it was just a severe thunderstorm warning, and his news producers were saying, hey, it's not a tornado, and there was no way to really explain that this one was different. So I think a thunderstorm emergency, I'm just throwing that out there. We'd have to coordinate that and collect a lot of comment on it, but that's one of the improvements I think that's on the table for us to explore.
Are there any other products that the emergency wording is being considered for?
Well, it's a great question. We're actually collecting feedback from our service leads. So I mentioned we have 11 service programs. Each of them has a lead, and we're asking that question. And each of these service leads has stakeholders that go all the way down to the WCMs and out to their partners. And so we're collecting that feedback. We also collected that feedback at the partners webinar as to which hazards might inherit an emergency level. And then the question is, well, do you want to do it the way we're already doing it for flash floods and tornadoes, to do it within the context of the warning, but just to say it's an emergency and use the impact-based warning machine-readable tags? Or do you want to actually create new products? So the idea of creating new products in hazard simplification kind of goes against the grain to create a new emergency product, because we're trying to reduce the number of products. But certainly communicating the threat for additional hazards is on the table. But at the same time, you really have to be careful about using that word emergency.
And I think, speaking from a broadcaster perspective, I mean, the impact-based warnings have improved our communication so much because it allows us to quickly glance at the warning, see what the main hazard is, and see the severity. I'm in Eastern Tennessee. We get a lot of pulse, severe thunderstorm warnings, 60 mile per hour winds, standard 1-inch hail. But being able to look at that and say, hey, the Weather Service is warning for 70 mile per hour winds or 80 mile per hour winds is significant with those impact-based warnings. And especially with the tornado warnings too, the tornado reported or tornado PDS warnings, it helps us out tremendously.
And for everybody who's watching this show, the feedback from all of you is so important too. And we can talk later about how you can provide that. But we're collecting feedback from across the enterprise. This is a pretty big deal.
And, we can jump into that a little bit. I mean, so some of the feedback that you guys have gotten, what were the main reasons of why, let's say, the flood advisories were consolidated?
There's just so many different flood products. I mean, we've had, I forget the exact number, but I think it's well over 10 to say, watch out, turn around, don't drown, right? And then the flood advisories in particular, there were so many different, we wanted to really be specific, and valid time event code allowed us to do that, to be really specific, although I have to say the flood advisories just have one. Getting a little technical here, but backing away from that for a minute, just so many flood products, and really what you're trying to say is, don't drive through flooded roadways, turn around, don't drown. And so we're investigating so the flash flood warning is its own unique product. I sometimes call these primary hazards, as you might think of primary colors. There's some products beyond which you don't want to consolidate, that you don't want to consolidate, and flash flood warning is one of those. So blizzard warning is likely another. It has its own connotation. People understand what it means, and it carries a level of urgency that you don't want to lose. But there's many products which we felt, and our survey showed we could consolidate. And really, the consolidation surveys we got for flooding were very, very positive.
Well, we talked a lot about consolidation. Two new products, or one new product especially, that's come to mind that I can think of in the past couple of years was a snow squall warning. Was that anything that came out of this hazard simplification process, or was that something separate?
Well, that really, it's a little bit of an anachronism, again, adding products where we're trying to reduce them. But this was a case where, and it happens in various locations close to home here, it always seems that once a year, somewhere in central Pennsylvania, there's a very quick, heavy snow squall with a cold front, well, usually with an Arctic front that comes through, and it goes to zero visibility for 15 to 20 minutes, and people get injured, and there are fatalities as a result of that. We didn't have a very fine scale tool as we have, say, for tornado warnings, to get down to the fine geographical scale to warn of these very specific hazardous events. A winter storm warning wouldn't do it. That covers entire zones and counties, and it wasn't a lake effect snow warning. So we decided, based on partner feedback, that this was something we wanted to do. And also, same for dust storm warnings. If you think out west in Arizona with these huge counties, we needed a very fine scale product that would enable us to message more specifically.
Where are you guys, if you could put a timeline on it, where are you guys now? And then when do you think this whole process wraps up? Is there a timeline that's been specified at all?
Well, we do have expectations with repair. So the repair requirements, and in other words, what we want to change, we're getting pretty close to done with that. And I expect that within 2 years, whatever consolidation and reformatting that's going to be done is pretty much going to be done. We haven't talked yet about the revamp. That's a more complicated process, but I'll just go right into that if that's all right, which is based on all the social science that we received and the testing we did for various alternatives to watch and advisory, and even for warning in terms of testing color, we have decided that we are going to test the feasibility of removing advisory from the system. The reason for that is that all of the surveys show that advisory is the least well understood term, and that it is badly misunderstood with watch. That was the big surprise in the research. There is confusion between watch and warning, no doubt. That's always there. But what we heard from a lot of our partners is we tested the word notice in place of watch, and that enjoyed some pretty good success. Even in the focus groups, there were some of our prototypes that tested well in the Generalizable survey. That was the one with 10,000 members of the public across various hazards. And so those are the ones that did the best were the ones we took into the focus groups. What may be surprising to you is that we tested a color system, much as they use in Europe and even in other countries, so kind of an orange warning, red warning approach. It did not test well out with our focus groups for various reasons. One, because of the number of agencies we have across the federal and state governments even that use different color scales for different types of things. Red means tornado in the Midwest, so if you used red, it would always connote a tornado. We have red flag warnings. And then emergency managers have their own color-coded system. And so quite honestly, I thought that was the way we might go, is to use a color-coded system for language, all right? But we did find that color as a supplemental tool, say how it colors your cell phone, and that, of course, is really important to make sure that these changes conveyed to mobile devices would work. But in the end, I stressed earlier how the three terms that are hierarchical, or that are not hierarchical rather, but are interpreted to be that way, that's really the root of the problem, and the fact that advisory is not well understood, and that it's confused with watch. And so what we're testing now is the idea of going to watch and warning, and then using what we're calling a descriptive message. That's not the name of the product, but just a description of the sub-warning hazards. We did hear, particularly from broadcasters and also from emergency managers, that the advisory level is important, but everyone agreed that the term is not really very well understood and it wasn't very important to them. So we're testing the idea of using something along the lines of a special weather statement, because as a broadcaster, you'll probably realize you don't read on the air the Weather Service has issued a special weather statement. You just read what the statement is. And so the big question is, does this product need a name? Is it a product even? It's just information. So if you think about information below the watch and warning level, then hazards are either possible or happening if they're significant, and everything else is just information. And so that's a lot, but that's essentially it.
We've actually taken our crawl system and been able to parse the warnings. And when the Weather Service puts out a special weather statement or significant weather advisory, we use a somewhat different term, and we use a strong thunderstorm alert. That's what pops up on our banners to discuss to the public that's what's happening. But you're right, in a way, it's almost like we've been issuing advisories through special weather statements, significant weather advisories for a long time now for these sub-severe storms that could almost easily be grouped into something else. And so I'm very curious to see how the weather message thing works out with the whole revamp system.
Me too. And one other piece about this is that we have all kinds of policy for each of our products, and a lot of them are criteria based. So different parts of the country have different inches of snow for a winter storm warning and a winter weather advisory, for example. And so our forecasters, follow our policy and are concerned about how many inches of snow there will be. But what we really want is for the focus to be on the impact. And so if there's a half inch of snow at rush hour that comes in 10 minutes in Washington, D.C., well, maybe that's a warning, and so if we focus less on these break points between special weather statement and advisory and warning, and make it more of a continuum of information with the what section of the message, and something called Common Alerting Protocol, which is really coming, which is machine readable urgency, severity, and certainty. Our forecasters, for the first time, with new warning software that's coming in a few years, are going to be able to specify that themselves. And so that urgency, severity, and certainty could link to colors that show up in your cell phone, could link to specific language of urgency that comes across in the message, rather than relying on the headline and the three terms to make these distinctions for you.
Eli, I had to bring out my notes that I took from your webinar last week. And you're talking about removing the advisory, and something that Ricky was talking about. I'm curious as well, because we live here in the Southeast. Although we don't get a lot of winter weather events, we get one or two throughout the year. And I'm wondering, when we have maybe a morning snowfall and school officials have to make that decision, sometimes a winter weather advisory may have not meant much to them. And so I'm wondering if that may go into play too, of how officials who need to make these decisions, maybe 2 inches of snow in North Carolina is going to shut everything down, where in Washington D.C. it may not. So that's going to be interesting to see if we do get rid of the winter weather advisory and make it like a specialized weather statement about snow from a different time frame. I think that's going to be interesting to see how that works out.
Well, and Scotty, the issue of the South and winter weather is, of course, very important. We had Atlanta snow jam, where that was a major issue. But the one thing I want to point out is that if we do away with the advisory headline, we're still going to be able to retain the specific messaging that comes along with an advisory, whether that's the language we use that people hear, or whether it's the machine readable code that our partners ingest to run their systems. We don't need to lose that. And I think that's a really important piece here. And that's what we're going to have to be workshopping with all our dissemination experts and such. So we don't want to lose any information. We just want to lose the confusion.
And I liked where you said we could see maybe short fused warnings like winter weather. Like you said in Washington, D.C., if you get a half inch of snow in a 20-minute time span, is that a warning area? And I think that could really be useful here in the South, where we see maybe a couple, 2-3 hours in the morning where we start to snow and then transition to rain. So I think that's definitely a good idea. And hopefully it'll get people's attention to see, just because we're expecting a lower amount, we still expect to see major impacts. So yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this goes. So my next question to you, and we'll kind of end with this, unless any of our panelists have anything. Ricky kind of alluded to it already. What's the path of this? What's the next 6 months, maybe year for the hazard simplification program? What are the next steps for you guys in getting everything implemented? I know you said we're going to start seeing some changes later on this year, but kind of give us a timeline of what to expect.
Sure. Okay. So the webinars that we held last week that you attended were not without purpose. We collected feedback from those webinars, and we're collecting feedback from our service experts on the issues such as emergency, such as what would we do if we lost the word advisory. We're having an internal workshop to analyze all that data next month. And then the output from that is going to start driving some proposals that we will, in all of our proposals, any change that we make, we always send out a public information statement. We give wide opportunities for comment, and I'll be happy to do as many webinars as needed to collect comment from all of you out there. We'll see how it gels, and then go to our senior leadership and say, hey, listen, this is what we found, and here are the changes that we'd recommend. And then the thing that's important, though, is that even if we made a decision on something very concrete within a year, which honestly is my goal, then there's a lot of detail. So first of all, the community, if we make changes, are going to have to update their protocols and and their documentation. We have to educate. We have to develop all the software and all the policy and make sure all the dissemination systems are working. So, what may seem like a simple change at the surface has an awful lot of tentacles, and this is our warning system. So it's very, very important that we get this right and that we test it and make sure that it works well. So you're not going to see these changes implemented fully in the same scale as the repair, which is the next few years. But hopefully within a few years after that, if we can get all of our requirements to our software developers in the next year or two, then we can really provide more definitive timelines at that point.
How much from an internal weather service standpoint, you mentioned new software coming. When one of these decisions is made, let's say, for example, the decision later this year to go from 5 different flood advisory terms to just one, what's the process like internally in the weather service to get that implemented through AWIPS?
Right. And so what we need to do is, again, we send out the public information statement. We analyze the data. We present that to our senior leadership for the validation. And once they validate it, yes, then we have to pass off these requirements to our software developers. You mentioned AWIPs, right? Absolutely. And there's varying levels of complexity. The small craft advisory change that's going to happen this November, where we're going to go from 4 products to 1, is actually just going to be a policy change. There's no software needed there, although there's some more changes that may come later on after that. But yes, and if we have to change the VTech codes or change anything else in the software, there's a lot of priorities in the plates of our software team. So we submit it to them and they do what they can, but it takes some time.
In other words, it's a good day to be a programmer in the weather service because you've got some job security coming your way.
Well, there's a lot of great innovations coming from, we have so many smart people in the field and there's so many innovations out there, and it comes up here through headquarters, and we have to rack and stock it. We don't have enough. We wish we could develop everything that comes our way, but we pick the highest priorities and then focus there.
Well, Eli, we certainly appreciate you joining us tonight, time out of your busy schedule. If folks want to learn more about this, is there a website, maybe some articles that they can read up on?
Right. So just go and Google our the National Weather Service Hazard Simplification. Our website will come up. I don't know if you can put the slide up, Scotty, where I sent you our website and also our email address, hazsimp@noaa.gov, HAZSIMP, one word, at noaa.gov. And I will see and all the emails, and I make it my policy to respond to all of them. So far, I'm successful at that. I want to be responsive and analyze everything that comes in. So please do let us know what you think, either now or as the project evolves and you see more from us.
Yeah, we'll definitely tweet out the website again that you guys can check out the information. Eli, anything else to add on before we close this part of the interview?
No, first of all, thank you so much for having me and for helping me to get the word out. And we really do want to hear from the community on this. We want to do the right thing. The evidence over 5 years of social science with 6 or 7 engagements has indicated that the advisory term is really the one that is least understood, and the 3 terms together is part of the problem. And so that's the direction we're investigating, but no final decisions have been made yet, and all the input we receive will be critical.
All right, that sounds great. Eli, thank you so much. Check out the Hazard Simplification website. We'll be able to tweet that out and put that out on our social media channels. We appreciate it. And we may have to have you maybe sometime next year to kind of catch up and see how the process is going. We definitely appreciate your time tonight.
And I appreciate that, and I'd be happy to come back. Thanks a lot, Scotty, and everybody.
Thank you, Eli. We're going to go to break right now. It is summer season. A lot of folks taking that last-minute vacation before school starts back. Let's learn a little bit about rip currents.
If you get caught in a rip current, you want to know your options. The first thing is to relax. Rip currents won't pull you under. They'll just pull you away from shore. If you can, swim out of the current along the beach and then back to shore at an angle following the breaking waves. If you can't escape, float or tread water while you wave and call for help on shore. But you also want to know your options if you're on shore and you see someone caught in a rip current who needs help. First, stay calm and take 10 seconds to think through your options. Alert lifeguards or someone on the beach. If there's no one to help, call 911. Look for a flotation device or anything that floats and see if you can get it to the person without entering the water. If you must enter the water, remember to always take a flotation device. All too often, someone attempting to make the rescue without the proper training and equipment is the one who drowns. Don't be a victim. Protect yourself so you can protect others. Remember to always be aware of potential hazards and that ocean conditions can change quickly. And if possible, swim near a lifeguard. If you make sure to know your options before you head to the beach, you'll be prepared for hazardous rip currents so you and your loved ones stay safe.
That is some pretty catchy music there, and welcome back to the Carolina Weather Group, 9 o'clock. James Brierton here in Charlotte. We just had a thunderstorm roll on through here in South Charlotte. Matter of fact, let's go out to radar right now as we kick off our 9 p.m. hour roundtable. We have 2 severe thunderstorm warnings right now across the Carolinas to tell you about. So much like the activity earlier today, this is isolated to North Carolina right now. We'll talk a little bit about what South Carolina saw a little bit earlier. Just getting word now the National Weather Service has canceled the severe thunderstorm warning for Davidson and Randolph, but we do have a new severe thunderstorm warning right now for Craven, Jones, and Pamlico counties until 9:45. I apologize, I think I said that wrong, but this is for the New Bern area of eastern North Carolina with a severe thunderstorm capable of 60 mile per hour winds and at least quarter-size hail. It's on the right side of your screen there. The polygon has not yet shown up there on the screen, but that was issued while we were in break. So again, we'll be tracking that severe thunderstorm warning as it makes its way through eastern North Carolina there as we are coming out of a fairly active day where we saw weather popping up across the area. Jared Smith, you're up on my screen right now, and you guys were not in the slight risk there in Charleston, South Carolina, but that didn't stop you guys from seeing a few rumbles of thunder, as I understand it.
No, certainly not. A few of us heard some rumbles of thunder, didn't get any rain. A lot of us didn't get any rain, but where you got the rain, it was very heavy. We had a gauge measure 3.6 inches of rain in northern parts of Mount Pleasant, a little area called Park West, Planters Point in that area. There's a real nice little bullseye on the radar. Precipitation product there. Others got nothing. I got nothing today. Heard a lot of thunder propagating, but nope, no rain. So just very much hit or miss. And it looks to continue. We have a couple of hail reports are really the thing. We had several reports of P to nickel-size hail from the storm down towards Bluffton. There was a spotter report of quarter-size hail. So, we certainly had our fair share of weather for some people. Some of us will not. Maybe some of us will see some weather tomorrow. But other than that, it's getting hot. Getting very hot down here. We'll get into that here in a few minutes. But let's talk a little bit about the active weather today, including a possible brief tornado.
Yeah, we've got the storm
Island
reports up here on the screen as well, too, to complement what you've been talking about.
Yeah, we have a lot of wind damage reports in North Carolina, and then getting into Virginia, plenty of them there. And I'm sure that we haven't gotten all of these. These are just preliminary. There's probably a lot more to roll in if warning ops are still going on at the Weather Service offices. I suspect they don't have a lot of time to log LSRs just yet. So I'm sure this will fill in as time goes on. But yeah, there may have been a brief tornado today at Figure 8 Island between Wrightsville Beach and Topsail Island. Thunderstorms moved through southeast North Carolina earlier today. It looks like they're trying to do that again. Trying to figure out whether it touched down or not. We don't know that it necessarily did and what kind of damage was done. The Weather Service will confirm that for us, and they'll let us know if or if not. But several videos were sent in here. This was a let me do a couple things here. I'm going to get this shared out for you guys. We're using a new technology here, and so I just want to make sure that I'm doing it right. But here's a video from Eric Davis, meteorologist at WECT. And I did not mean to stop my video there. My bad. And then, yep. So I'm still learning where everything is, and I apologize for that. But pretty good looking video of a funnel here. I am going to, here we go. In just a moment, we're going to share.
Your office doesn't use Zoom, Jared?
No, we don't use Zoom. Believe it or not, we don't use Zoom. At least I don't. But anyway, so here is the all right, so my screen share, there it goes. Not the best buzzer beaters TDs in NFL history. Apparently I like a lot of sports. But yeah, there's your funnel. Yeah, that looks trying to kick it in a full screen
like
here.
Yeah,
there's your funnel.
I've never seen a funnel. Oh, that also looks like a football game. There it goes.
There it goes. Yeah, there's your funnel. And yeah, spinning up pretty nicely. Nice little spin up. That looks like it's on the ground, so we'll see what the Weather Service finds.
Looks to me to be on the ground. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see what the Weather Service finds, but that is that's pretty much that's on the level. So certainly interesting to see what happens there. Again, August, this time of year, we have a good bit of water spouts that happen down here in Charleston. And you can get these spin-up tornadoes. Storms hook onto the sea breeze, especially if you have some westerly flow aloft. They can start to rotate. With the storm that we had earlier today in Charleston, it had some persistent rotation on it for a little bit that we were keeping an eye on. It was sometimes got pretty deep, so that was certainly an interesting thing. So speaking of Wrightsville Beach, Sunday was a bad day there too. We had 40 swimmers rescued due to rip currents. We saw the rip current video earlier. Is one of the reasons why we played the rip current video is because 40 people need to see it. The good news is is that it doesn't seem like anybody was hurt. and then that's a good thing, but these are dangerous. Rip currents are dangerous. I mean, you always hear of fatalities from these things. And so please, be careful. When the red flags are up, as they were, and the Weather Service had the moderate risk rip currents out, but I guess it was, I guess they could have gone to a high and not really been a big deal considering all the rescues from the rips there. And again, these can happen at any time. So we need people to be careful of these things, especially as we get towards the end of the summer. They can just take you right out and it's not fun. It's not a good thing. So something to be watching there. Fortunately, no word on injuries on that. And finally, at the risk of jinxing it, the tropic is quiet. They might stay that way for at least a few days. We're getting close to the peak of the season, though, so don't get too excited about no hurricanes. But don't let your guard down. But you know what? I'm going to take this as long as I can. So we got Evan. He's going to talk a little bit about the month that was of July in Carolina weather.
Yeah, Jared, thank you. So we're about a week removed from July now, which is hard to believe. We're only 24 days from the beginning of meteorological fall. So, wow, I don't know where summer went, but truthfully, I'm excited because it's one of the best seasons, probably the best season. Sorry, Scotty. Scotty likes the hot weather, but not about that. Anyways, let's talk about the weather for the Carolinas throughout July. It was actually a warmer than average month for both of the states. You can see here
that sounds about right.
Yeah, it's summertime. It's hot. It's felt hot. But it was 0.8 degrees Fahrenheit above average in North Carolina. There was a high point of 105 in Dunn out in the central, can you call it the Sandhills? I'm not quite sure. And then as low as 43 in Mount Jefferson. So about a 65-degree departure between those two highs, or those two temperatures, which is pretty substantial. 43 is very cold for July in North Carolina. It was the 28th warmest month, warmest July on record here in North Carolina. And I'm going to see if I can. I'm trying to switch to the next one.
What's interesting about 28 is you would almost think it would have been higher. We are constantly breaking these records, and not that 28th isn't significant, but I would have thought it would have been higher. Because think how many days we were above 90.
It constantly felt hot, but I think the humidity also played a big role in that.
That's true, because these are air temperature readings, aren't they?
Yeah, there was a 5-day period when Mount Jefferson recorded that 43 where it was cooler, I guess you could say. But even cooler in July is still not truly cool. But we can move on to the precipitation data. It was, once again, below average. So just barely below average in North Carolina. And you can kind of see on the map here that just like typical summertime pattern, it was spotty rain here and there. So parts of western North Carolina were above average, but parts of eastern and central Carolina, North Carolina, were below average or near average. So it wasn't too far below, and I think 44th driest overall out of 125 years. So that's pretty close to middle ground, I'd say. And then, that actually, some of that rain in eastern North Carolina managed to bring down the drought monitor just a tad over eastern North Carolina. We didn't see a little bit of reduction in moderate drought, but a nice reduction in the abnormally dry intensity over that portion of North Carolina. Now, moving over to South Carolina, it was also warmer than average, but significantly warmer than North Carolina was. I think it was a degree and a half above average with a high of 103 in Hellion. Helene, maybe getting that right, and a low of 48 in Jockasee. So that's a pretty typical cold spot for South Carolina. But that one was definitely much warmer than normal. And then also, I believe it was just slightly colder than last July. Precipitation wise, it was pretty dry in the northeastern or northwestern parts of the state. There was a co-op in Anderson that barely recorded an inch, and one in Fountain Inn that didn't even crack an inch for the month. So 0.81 inches of rain is very dry. But on the opposite side of the spectrum, down Jared's way, they had 12.5 inches of rain in Somerville. That's over a foot. So that's maybe 3 times as much as they normally see in a month. In the month of July, that's 300% departure. But overall, it was dry for the state, 1.5 inches below their normal July precipitation. Then there was definitely an increase in that drought monitor across the state. So that is July in review, and I guess we'll be doing August soon. Time's flying by.
I know.
That's funny. You know, how many times has it been, Jared, that the western part of the Carolinas has been wetter than your part of the area of South?
You know, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, you know, one, you guys have been in a little better proximity to the disturbances. We've been under a ridge. We spent a good bit of July, you know, with a fair bit of ridging, and then with the sea breeze, you know, that sea breeze often clears out and only starts really getting those parcels lifted when you get into around Somerville. And so, you know, that sea breeze will clear Charleston. It'll be a beautiful day downtown. You're not going to see a bit of rain, but you get into Somerville and you're going to have a day where you wring out 2 to 3 inches of rain in a spot. That's kind of what happened today in Mountain. It's just very much hit or miss, very few and far between. But we have not had any organized weather systems make it this far south.
We had a couple of those stalled out fronts too between us that I think also kept us on the wetter side.
Yep, we had the stalled out fronts there. I mean, we really enjoyed that one stalled out front in the middle of the month. That was great. And I hate the wedge most of the year, but in the months of June, July, and August, I am pro wedge. I'm 100% pro wedge. Love the wedge in those months. And
the only wedge I like is pizza wedge. I don't want any wedge.
What's a pizza wedge?
A wedge
is ice in the wedge.
A wedge salad, maybe, with that.
Yeah, you can get a wedge salad, but pizza wedge is not a thing, Scotty.
Okay.
Wow.
Anyways.
It's because he's a fan of the summertime. Those people are crazy. They don't understand
This is what happens
I disagree
when we go into a quad box.
I know, this is like the Brady Bunch right here. Like, I'm looking over here at Evan right now.
Yeah, we've got we just
the clubs come off.
Chaos, disorder, and quad boxes. But it's just been fascinating to see. This has been an interesting pattern. We've had this consistent trough in the east, and in the ridging in the we've got. I mean, it's a freaking omega block, for crying out loud. Like, it's August. Like, why are we but keep it, because the tropics are quiet. I don't have to worry about anything. Like, there's, I mean,
careful now.
At least not right now. Knocking on wood. I had the second time I've had to do it tonight.
Jared, we're going to have that heat ridge that's going to start moving in towards the mid part of this month. And the old saying, ridge over troubled waters.
Exactly. So again, like we said, like I said in the news segment, guys, it ain't over yet. This isn't over by a long shot, but we're going to take what we can get.
I'm still stuck on ridge over troubled waters.
It's true. It's a beautiful way to put it.
Those little tropical systems like to sneak in here when we have a ridge. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm. I mean, statistically, September 10th-ish is when that spike. So
we're getting it. It's like going up the incline of a roller coaster right now. We're about to get to the peak. So
that roller coaster is steep too.
Right. Anyone who's sitting at home right now thinking, "Oh, I guess the tropics just isn't going to do anything this year," like there's
time.
We're on the chain now on that first lift.
We're
of the coaster.
So convinced that something's going to happen. We've got an open show date in September, just waiting for something to happen that week.
So listen, tropics, something needs to happen, but it does not need to be bad, because otherwise we're going to be doing this that week,
Every night.
which I'll be okay with.
We'll be in our little quad box, but we'll have. Hey, listen, now we can have up to 100 people on this show.
That would be a lot of people in a quad.
100 box.
Y'all don't know about this new program we got. Listen, we're glad Google Hangouts is going.
This is very inside baseball, but WSB in Atlanta during their snow coverage is known for making ridiculous 100 reporter boxes. Watch out, WSB.
Do that.
Coming for you.
Well, the thing I love about the quad box is that we can all be in our own quadrant. It's like if I'm in the northeast quadrant, I've got a lot of tornadoes. If Evan's in the southwest quadrant, he's got nothing going on. He's really bored. And so anyway, sorry, that was a really.
Y'all gave me the northwest for Northwest Flow. James really loves me.
I thought we were going to do the Brady Bunch thing and just kind of all turn and smile at each other.
Oh my goodness.
Are you enjoying this random talk? Because we're still live talking to you right now.
Oh, hello.
This is like Carolina Weather Group After Dark.
That's right. This is what normally happens when we go off.
Yeah.
But here we are.
We've actually got a peak in viewership spikes. I'm watching on my phone right now. So
while we're here, I figure that I would do our viewers a service and show them the curve of the peak of the season. We are about. Can you guys see my mouse? Is my mouse coming through on that? Okay, cool. We are here. We got a long way up the hill. So again, folks,
Florence was right September, and then Michael was October.
Right around here.
I want to say again, Florence was after the peak, and Michael was in October.
Michael was in October. Again, you can still get nasty storms going down the peak. Again, this is just frequency, right? So, and as you can see, that frequency can jump up quick. I mean, we had, 2 years ago, we all remember it well. It was pretty quiet. And then we were all celebrating the eclipse. And then right after that, we had Harvey, we had Irma, and it's just bang, 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 bang. So again, these things can turn on a dime.
That's that story that Jim Cantori told on our show, right? He went from covering the eclipse, immediately just didn't even go home, I don't think.
Exactly right. So again, these things can turn. So stay aware, but enjoy the quietness in the tropics.
Yeah, enjoy it. I was seeing we're starting to get these winter predictions. We get these long-term model runs that go out into December and January, and we're starting to see these trickle in, and the sea surface temperatures remain warm through winter. So that just goes on to the tropics that, there's no lack of warm water out there for these storms to breed off of. So
I'm just happy you mentioned computer models and not fog days and beans in a jar.
Yeah. So
how have we not talked about that yet?
We had our first foggy morning here on yesterday, Tuesday. So I put a bean in the jar. Now, some friends in the mountains have already got 4 beans in the jars.
We got 7 now.
The people in the mountains probably don't think this needs to be explained, at least the ones who are participating in it. But for the rest of us, maybe us transplants, could you...
Sure.
We're a different breed up here.
So there's a weather folklore out there, and I had my weather folklore book around here somewhere, but I can't find it right now. But for every foggy morning in August, you're supposed to drop a bean in a jar, a cup, whatever you want to drop it in. And at the end of August, you empty it out and you count how many beans are in there, and that's supposed to equal how many snows that you'll have during the winter season. So
I'm asking people in the comments right now to weigh in on whether or not they do this.
Okay,
what type of beans? How big of a jar?
I see. There's people that they ask me, what kind of beans? Is there a difference between big beans and small? I don't know. I don't really trust weather folklore, but I just know that people do it around here, so I've started doing it just to see what happens.
There's nothing to it. I did the research last year, and I pulled it up here, so I'm going to screen share real quick. This is going to be the messiest graph you've ever seen because I'm not touching it up.
Now, see, Evan gets more foggy days than I do because he lives in.
Well, that's right. So. Where are we reporting this from?
But there's no correlation on that anywhere.
He's even got a spreadsheet with all this information.
Why did you not put this in the notes for the show?
That's a good question.
So you had 6 foggy days last year, and you had 12 inches of snow. Is that what?
Yeah, but I don't think that the KAVL sensor does a good job of reporting fog. Because we have way more than 6.
So you're saying that you have to do it again this year, but at a different reporting location?
Sure. Yes. Yeah, I'll pick
Well,
KT&B.
We're going to reject this paper. Yep, we're rejecting this paper. Yep.
That's
The beans are real.
Peer reviewed.
Beans are real until further notice.
2011, you didn't have any snow measured at all?
No, I think we may have had half an inch, so I'll reshare that.
How does that happen?
Yeah, that was a weird winter.
Well, it's like watching a pot of water on the stove. It doesn't boil when you're watching it.
Now, I remember that 2009 season. We had a white Christmas. Everybody in North Carolina had a white Christmas in 2009.
We had it in Charlotte. I remember that well.
Probably north of
I don't think you guys didn't get in on the action, did you, Jared? Maybe northern parts of South Carolina?
No, 2009.
Yeah. Or are you still in DC?
No, I was in Charleston. We had 2009, 2010. We had that Valentine's Day snow down here, and that's something that happens occasionally. But yeah, we don't get in any of that. It's very rare. We got to have a coastal storm in order to get a really good snow. That's really the only way it happens here. Coastal storm and a wedge. All
right, I'm getting the wrap from our producer, so we'll go ahead.
Your same producer is also looking for video of snow now.
Are you going to show us some snow? Why you do that?
I can fill if you need.
Why you do that? Next week we have on with us, speaking of snow, we have on Greg Carbon. He is the director of the Weather Prediction Center, and they issue snowfall forecasts. So we'll ask Greg about snowfall forecasts and all the other things they do at the Weather Prediction Center.
I don't have snow video, but I can put this up out of irony. This is the forecast for Greenville, Spartanburg of snow in the next 24 hours. Just so we're clear.
No snow in the next 24 hours. So that
was close.
But anyways, we hope you've enjoyed the Carolina Weather Group. We appreciate you watching. Don't forget, we are always looking for your suggestions for guests and show topics. And we are also looking for your Hurricane Hugo stories. If you experienced Hugo, if your family did, if you have any pictures, videos, you can send them to us via Facebook or Twitter. And we can also give you an email address, carolinawxgroup@gmail.com. You can submit those there. We'll be sorting through those and adding a couple throughout our Hurricane Hugo 30th year anniversary show. So we'd love to have those as well. But for everyone here at the Carolina Weather Group, we hope you have a great weekend. Stay cool out there. It is going to heat up this weekend. And we'll see you back here next Wednesday night for another episode of the Carolina Weather Group. Let's go home, boys. Let's go. Bye.